All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Hippie Moms podcast. Today's guest is so in alignment with Hippie Moms. And this is Kristina. And you know what? I didn't ask you, how do I say your last name? I want to make sure I don't butcher it.
Marusic.
Marusic. Beautiful. Kristina, thanks for being here. Okay, so people know who you are based on the introduction that we gave before, but I want to know what brought you into this work. Tell us your story.
My younger sister Abby was diagnosed with thyroid cancer when she was 25 years old, and we're close in age. I was 27 at the time. And 25 is very young for a cancer diagnosis. So it really caught my sister and me and the rest of our family off guard when that happened. And at the time, her doctor said that thyroid cancer typically runs in families, but no one else in our family had ever had it before, and no one's had it since. And I now get screened every year, and we're all really meticulous about that. But her doctor said in this kind of offhanded way that if there wasn't a genetic component, then it was possible that she was exposed to something in the environment that might have increased her cancer risk. But they really didn't have any more information they could share about that. And when we went Googling and trying to find answers, there just really wasn't a lot out there. We had a hard time finding answers to, was this something we did? Was this where we lived? We just couldn't find a lot of information. And then I started my career as an investigative journalist, and I was still thinking about that when I wrote a series a couple years after she had been sick on disproportionately high rates of certain types of cancer in Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania, which is where we live, and the role that our industrial air pollution problems here are likely playing in that. And then I talked to lots of experts about are there carcinogens in our drinking water that could be playing a role? Are there other places we're getting exposed to chemicals that could be raising our risk for this handful of cancer types that we have really high rates of here? And that series won a couple of awards, and I got a really lovely note from a publisher saying, "Congratulations on your awards. Would you have any interest in turning this into a book with a national scope?" And so that's how I came to write my book. But really, it was my personal connection with having a sister who had cancer at a young age that really got me started thinking about environmental health and thinking about these issues. And we're certainly not alone. We know that cancer rates in children and young adults are on the rise. And there have been a lot of headlines recently about cancer among millennials and young people. Um, and some of the things I learned while I was reporting on this issue were really shocking to me and led me want to dig into it more. And I should also say my sister is doing great. My sister had her thyroid removed and she went through treatment. I was actually living abroad teaching English when she got her diagnosis, and I moved home so I could be close and help out while she went through her surgery and her treatment. And she's been in remission for more than a decade. She has two super cute kids. She lives close by. I get to see her all the time. So she was one of the lucky ones for sure.
Oh, that's beautiful, Christina. And you never understand why these things happen. And there's obviously so many, behind the scene things that we really don't understand. But what I think is so beautiful is it propelled you to look into
Mm-hmm.
something that you wouldn't have looked into. And now you have a book that is going to be impacting hopefully hundreds of thousands of people and help raising awareness. So, what did you discover in your research? What did you see? What were some of the things that came up? We have a community of moms. We are concerned. You can only control so much, and stress is
Mm-hmm.
also just as toxic as I think anything else that we can put in our body. So it's important to what are some things that you discovered? And then let's lead us to what are some things that we can do to help protect ourselves and our children?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So I was really surprised to learn that rates of childhood cancer have been rising around the world since we started tracking cancer cases in a uniform way in like the 1970s. And it's pretty upsetting to look at the charts. When you look at a chart of childhood cancer over time in the United States, or when you look at the global level, the lines just go diagonal across the page. And um, some of the experts I spoke with in the course of writing the book have said, that's too fast to be the result of genetic changes because those happen over centuries and not decades. And we're also not sometimes when you see an increase in diseases over time, it's because we've developed better diagnostic tools. And so we're diagnosing more of something that's kind of always been there. But when it comes to something like childhood leukemia, which is the most common type of childhood cancer, the basic diagnostic tools are the same now as they have been forever. So it's also not a matter, that doesn't kind of explain away this increase we're seeing. And so this is a real rapid increase in childhood cancer cases. And the thing that has changed a lot during that same time period is the number of manufactured chemicals that we're all exposed to on a daily basis, kind of constantly in our daily lives. So there have been more than 300,000 new chemicals invented in the last 100 years. And some of them are really helpful, right? Some of them have helped prevent millions of people from dying from dysentery, for example, because we can use them to clean drinking water. Some of them have also been really harmful. We can think about chemicals like Agent Orange being used as a weapon of warfare and impacting generations of people who were exposed. So they're not all bad. And they're not all good, but a lot of them have never been tested for their effects on kids and babies and pregnant parents. So a lot of pediatricians and epidemiologists and experts in this are starting to raise a flag and say, it seems like this is a likely cause of these increases in childhood cancer that we're seeing, and this is something we need to start paying a lot more attention to.
Mm, yes, we do. And isn't it true that these chemicals come out, they're not tested? It's almost like they're safe until they're proven not safe.
That's definitely true in the United States.
Okay.
So some other countries do a better job of regulating chemicals that enter the marketplace. The European Union is kind of the big example of a place where, generally speaking, if a company wants to introduce a new chemical to consumers, then they have the burden of doing testing to prove that it's safe and that
Right.
it's safe over for an immediate exposure and then also over like a 20-year exposure period. Whereas here, we tend to do it the opposite way. We just kind of say, go ahead, do whatever you want. And then 20 years later, we end up with class action lawsuits like we're seeing now related to PFAS or forever chemicals. And like we've seen with cancer cases that were linked to Johnson and Johnson baby powder containing asbestos. So in the United States, we're doing a much worse job than in many other parts of the world at testing and regulating chemicals that can increase our cancer risk. And
Mm,
so with the book, I really I don't want to freak people out. You mentioned that moms are stressed and this is all stressful. And it's definitely, as you start learning about this, it can feel a little scary and a little overwhelming.
yes.
But the book is really focused on solutions to this problem. It's really focused on the people who've devoted their lives to making the world safer and trying to protect us from chemicals that raise our cancer risk and protect our kids. And I found that when I learned their stories and heard about the successes they had had, I felt a little less overwhelmed and miserable about all this and a little more hopeful and optimistic. And it made me want to find ways that I could get involved and help. And so I hope it does that for readers too.
That's what we need because and I just want to reiterate, because when you start to become aware that there's no person or entity looking out for the safety of you and your family, there's actually none of that. It can be overwhelming and stressful. And then you look at all the products you're using, right? Household, beauty, what you're putting in your what you're consuming, the furniture, it becomes so overwhelming, Kristina. And it's almost like that analysis by paralysis by analysis, where you're just like so in your head, so heady, you can't move. So if we were going to talk about like the biggest things we can do in our homes, Can you walk us through that? Like, what would be some things you're like, if you're going to do anything, do this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really like to emphasize again that it's not fair to ask individual people to worry about this and stress all this, and especially moms who are so busy and have so much on our plates already. So ultimately, we need to push for systemic change, right? We need better regulations in this country that would make it so that you can go to the grocery store and buy anything off the shelf and assume that it's going to be safe for you and your kids. So ultimately, I want to nudge people in the direction of contacting your lawmakers and supporting the organizations that are doing this work. But in the meantime, that can all take a while. So we all definitely want the stuff we can do in our homes too. And there are a couple of things that I've started doing since I learned all of this while writing the book. And the three kind of easiest, biggest ones are getting a really good water filter at home, filtering the air, the indoor air in your house periodically, and then switching your personal care and cleaning products over to less toxic versions. So those are the big three that I tend to talk about. And I always like to emphasize too that it's not about being perfect. It's just not possible to entirely avoid harmful chemicals because they're kind of everywhere, unfortunately. It's about what are the easy, accessible things where you can take some big swings that are going to reduce your exposure while we work on pushing for better regulations that'll keep us all safer. And so we can talk about those three things a little more if you like. I have some specific
Yes.
suggestions
Oh,
on things like water filters.
please, please tell us, give us as much as you can because we need help.
Okay, so when it comes to home water filters, they're not all equally good, unfortunately. And a study came out just recently that found that there are PFAS, that stands for PFAS, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. These are those forever chemicals that you might have heard about. There was a movie that came out a couple years ago about these called Dark Waters with Mark Ruffalo in it. And these chemicals are linked to a whole bunch of unpleasant health effects, including raising our cancer risk. And it refers to this big class of chemicals. It's like 15,000 chemicals that all have the same kind of chemical properties, and they don't break down naturally. So they can build up in our bodies, they can build up in soil and water, they can build up in animals in the food chain, and that's where they start causing problems. And these chemicals are used to make stuff non-stick and waterproof and stain resistant. So anytime you have like waterproof clothes, they've probably been coated in PFAS. When you're using a
Mm.
non-stick pan or cookware, that's been coated in PFAS. It's even in stuff like butter wrappers and microwave popcorn bags to keep,
Mm.
it'll create like a barrier for grease or greasy foods. They're
Oh,
found in a bunch of takeout packaging and wrappers. So really they're just so hard to avoid because they're kind of everywhere. And a recent study came out finding that these chemicals are also in 45% of American tap water, which is a much higher percentage than we would hope for, knowing how
oh.
bad these chemicals are, because again, they don't go away. So they tend to stick around in communities and groundwater when they get there. But a group of researchers recently tested a whole bunch of water filters right after this study came out to see which home water filter systems are best at removing these chemicals and also, remove other substances of concern in drinking water. And the three brands they found that remove 100% of PFAS were Zero Water.
Mhm.
There's another one called Clearly Filtered,
Really
and
felt.
there's one called Berkey Travel, Berkey. And those are all home, like pitcher
Yeah.
systems. So they're not a whole house thing. They're very affordable. They have them sometimes at Target, definitely on Amazon and online. So investing in a really good pitcher filter, or they also have like, bigger, if you have a bigger family and you're constantly going through a pitcher. I know Zero Water has like a big multi-gallon countertop one.
Yes.
Um,
I
so
actually
those,
use oh, go ahead.
yes,
I was just gonna say I actually have a zero water that I take with me when I travel.
cool.
Yeah, because the filters are inexpensive. It's you can get it at Walmart. It's pretty inexpensive. Berkey's are a little more expensive. I haven't heard of the other one. What's it called? Clear filter? What was it again?
Clearly filtered.
Clearly filtered. Okay. Okay. Cool. That those, I mean, those are great solutions. And it doesn't, and most of them are just, you can put it on your counter and you fill up the water, right? And then it just goes through. So you can, it's not like you have to have a system installed.
Right, exactly. And they're pretty inexpensive, and the filters aren't, super expensive either. So definitely that's a quick, kind of easy thing you can do to start reducing exposure to some of these chemicals in your tap water. When it comes to filtering indoor air, when we think of bad air quality and air pollution, we usually think of outdoor air, and we've been talking about it a lot this summer with the Canadian wildfires and the kind of bad air days that a lot of East Coast cities were experiencing this summer. But indoor air can also kind of trap pollutants from outdoors. And then we're learning a lot about what comes out of your gas stove when you turn your gas stove on. And there are some chemicals that can raise cancer risks that are emitted when you turn a gas stove on. And then all the stuff that's in like any cleaning product you spray, all can kind of like build up in your indoor air, especially in winter months when we tend to have our houses closed up for those of us who live in places with cooler climates in the winter. So, and I was also surprised to learn when writing my book that Americans spend 95% of our time indoors, that's an average. So some of us spend more time outdoors, but
Oh my
that's
gosh, get
shocking
out,
to me.
people.
I know. So filtering your indoor air periodically, especially when the outdoor air pollution is really bad, can go a long way toward just making sure your family is breathing cleaner air when they're in the house.
Yeah.
And the best version of an indoor air filter is a HEPA filter, but HEPA purifier systems can be very expensive.
Expensive.
So there's a really cool DIY version though, where you kind of build just the filter part of a HEPA filter into a box fan, and then you can use it to purify the air in your house. And there are like varying levels of difficulty. There's one where it's kind of just a filter in a box fan. There's one where you like construct a box around it, and maybe are using multiple filters. But those are all very cost effective. So if
That's
you
amazing.
have some time and you can Google DIY box fan HEPA filter, you can make one in lieu of investing in a big HEPA indoor filter.
Okay, that's really great to know because they are expensive, especially if you're going to have one in your room and the kids' room and the so the filters a great, so that's something we should look at. That helps. What are like, some other thing is like leaving your windows open, having plants, like what are some other things? Obviously, like you said, using non-toxic household chemicals, right? Because those just stay in the air and then they land and now they're on, in the dust and stuff, right?
Yeah, that's true. So I know there have been some studies that found that wet mopping periodically can be really helpful just for picking up dust and getting anything harmful that might be lingering in dust so that it's not, then circulating back into your air and settling on surfaces. So,
No dry dusting.
and
Don't dry dust.
yeah, dry dusting probably wet dusting is like,
Yeah.
I think a little better for actually removing the stuff.
Yeah.
Definitely, if you have a gas stove and you have a range hood, you always want to be running, especially. So I have a range hood and a gas stove, but mine just vents right back into the kitchen. So mine's not very useful. You need a range hood that vents outside or even into the garage. You want to be pulling the air from above the stove and getting it outside. We don't have that, so we try to just open the kitchen window every time we're using the stove. I think eventually we'll probably switch to. You can Google some of the research on gas stoves and what they're putting into our homes, and it's actually it's
I
worse
don't
than
know.
you would think, and it's worse than researchers kind of
Oh,
hypothesized when they started doing these studies. So we're now thinking about, we cook a lot. We generally prefer cooking on a gas stove, but we're thinking about if we want to switch to an electric induction kind of thing eventually, or at least upgrade our vent hood if
yeah.
we don't do that.
Yeah. No, thank you for saying that. That is something like whenever my husband turns on, or anyone, I'm just like, make sure you turn on the hood. But isn't it even when we cook with electric, we still need the flow, right? I mean, anything is it just gas or is it because I heard that any type of cooking, you need to be able to vent it out of the house.
You're definitely creating particulate matter in the
Yeah.
air anytime you're cooking stuff, but With an electric stove, those particles are, my understanding is those particles are a little less harmful than when you have combustion of like natural gases. Then sometimes chemicals like benzene, which is a known carcinogen, are emitted. And so the chemical reactions that are happening with combustion from a gas stove are just a little bit nastier than what's happening when you're cooking with an electric stove. But yes, anytime you're cooking, if you have a good range hood that vents outside, I think it's a good idea to turn it on.
Okay. So good to know. So good to know. And like, it's just baby steps, right? I mean, like I have a gas stove. I mean, maybe eventually I will get that, but now I can turn on my hood. I can open the windows. I can make sure, because sometimes, you turn it on and if the fire's not lit, gas is just going in. You have to be extra careful and aware of working with a gas stove. That's just how it is.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
And that's
Is
another reason, if you're you cooking with your gas stove a lot, that's a good time to run the air filter periodically. Turn on the air filter for a couple of hours. We have you mentioned having one in kind of each room. We have like one big heavy duty HEPA air purifier that can do, if it's in kind of your big open common room, it says it can clean a large room or a kind of like open home space basically overnight. Like if we run it overnight once a week, it'll get the whole area. And a single room with the door closed is like 2 hours. So we just kind of move it around. We just kind of put it room to room and do it periodically. We definitely aren't running it 24/7 or anything like that. I just, if we've been cooking a ton and I'm aware that the air in the house is like a little, feeling a little
yeah,
smelly, I'll run
yeah.
the air filter.
Okay, so good to know. And did you do your DIY or did you actually buy one?
We had one.
Okay.
My stepson had really bad allergies when he was a baby. So it's like a really old heavy duty one, but you replace the filter like once every 15 years or something like that. So
Oh,
it was expensive at the time, but it still works really well. And we don't have to replace the filters often. It's huge. It's like comically large. It's lightweight, so it's easy to move around, but like it's an eyesore.
yeah, totally. Well, hey, clean air eyesore. I'd rather take the clean air.
Yeah, same.
Sure. Okay, that's great. I'm really going to start looking into the air filters. I think especially because we do gas cook, I think that okay, just baby steps, baby steps. Okay, what's next?
And then that third kind of big category I mentioned, where it can be easy to take a couple steps that can reduce our exposure to harmful chemicals, is buying less toxic personal care and beauty and cleaning products. And that can feel tricky because ingredient lists are long and they're printed very small, and the names of harmful chemicals are like hard to remember. There are also some challenges where they're not always listed, and one example of that is that there are some common ingredients in hair products that when they combine and are heated release formaldehyde. So formaldehyde won't be listed, but if you're using these products and then heating your hair, like drying it or using a curling iron or heat styling, then you can be releasing formaldehyde into the air and inhaling it, and formaldehyde is a carcinogen. So it's really hard to, you know, I for the book, I talked with people who have like PhDs in organic chemistry and spend all day every day thinking about this. And they're like, oh, I can't even trying to read ingredient lists all day. It's so hard to know. And so an easier way, a much easier way, is there are a couple of really good tools that can help you find non-toxic products. So there's one called the Healthy Living app, and that's by the Environmental Working Group. It's an app where you can scan barcodes, but you can also just kind of browse by category, and they score things on the basis of whether they contain a bunch of toxic chemicals, including carcinogens. And they also give like a seal of approval to products that are free of a long list of harmful chemicals. So when I was kind of going through this process, the way that I did it was, rather than just throwing everything out at once and starting over, which felt really overwhelming for me, I just waited until I was about to run out of something, say mascara, And then I would go into that app and I would type in mascara and I would find a couple of the brands that they had given their seal of approval to. Then I'd look them up and read reviews and just pick that way. So that can be a kind of more gradual approach. There's also a really cool browser extension that is called Clearia,
Yeah.
Clearya. And so you like add it onto your Google Chrome. I think it's specifically for Chrome. I don't know if it works for other browsers. But if you Google it, it comes right up and it will give you information about toxic chemicals and products as you're browsing. So if you're shopping online,
Oh,
it'll, give you information about the products that are in the database.
wow.
And there's another one called Made Safe, which is another, it's like a certification program. And I know that they are stringent and have good qualifications. And so you can go to their website and browse um, products that are, they have verified are free of toxic chemicals, and you can find products that way. So I have found it easier rather than trying to just like check everything I have, wait until I'm running out of something, like I said, and then use that as an opportunity to kind of do like a non-toxic upgrade.
That, I mean, that is the way, my friends. That really is, because it's not overwhelming. You can use what you've bought. You don't feel like you're throwing away money. And then you just make a better choice next time. And what's so amazing, Kristina, this is what I think about, as more and more people do that and they make decisions for cleaner products, just think about the changes that's going to make, because it really starts from the consumer, right? Because we
Yeah, that's
are the ones that are
mhm.
going to change it. I feel you, like trying to change the systems is like, yes, but it's this old structure that's obsolete. It almost needs to just come completely down and we need to rebuild. And I feel like this is how we rebuild, by voting with our dollars.
Yeah, definitely voting with our dollars, it is important, and pushing for market pressure and market changes is another way, along with kind of advocating for better regulations that we can try to make these things safer. And I write in my book about another thing you can do that can really amplify the impact of making those choices and shopping with your wallet. And that is taking a couple extra minutes to let both companies know that you made the switch and why. So if you've been using the same hand cream your whole life, it's your favorite hand cream, you love it, your mom used it too, you find out it contains some harmful chemicals and some chemicals that are raising your cancer risk. So you decide to swap it out for something else. That company is unlikely to notice, just one person making that change. Even if a bunch of people are leaving, they won't have any idea why. But if you can, either on social media adds a kind of public pressure element because they get worried that other people are seeing this information, or call their 800 number or send an email and say, hey, I love this product. I've used it my whole life, but I'm not going to use it anymore. I'm switching because it contains these harmful ingredients. Please do better. And then also letting company B know, hey, I'm switching to your product from this other one I used to use. Thank you so much for making your formula free of toxic chemicals. That can go a much longer way toward creating that kind of market pressure, market impact, because
Love that.
companies really rarely hear from consumers anymore. They're like, maybe they look at reviews and maybe they're concerned about a bad review, but especially if it's a giant company that is available in the grocery store, they really rarely hear from people. And so if they get a couple emails telling them, we don't want these chemicals that are in your formula in our shampoo or our hand cream or whatever, that's when they really start to take notice and when we can help drive those market shifts.
I love that. I love that. And it really just takes a few minutes, right? Go to the website, contact us, fill in the information. Because really, as mothers, and really starting to have this movement towards, back to mother nature is what I like to put it. um it feels so good to like start making better choices. And what I've realized too is, as you start to do that and you start to make an impact, like it's almost like you get little victories, and then and from a year, 2 years, you're just going to be in a completely different place, than you were.
Yeah.
So it's
Mhm.
sometimes it can feel overwhelming here. And I really, like we said so many times, stressing about it doesn't do anything. right? It's just about, like you said, making these small steps forward. And I love the idea of reaching out to the companies. I think that's just brilliant.
Yeah, and then you mentioned that it feels really daunting to try and like contact our lawmakers and change federal regulations. I think it's worth mentioning that there have been some really big victories, even just in the last couple of years, with states stepping up to regulate harmful chemicals. Um, Minnesota just passed a really sweeping ban on PFAS, those chemicals we talked about earlier, in basically all consumer products that'll go into effect in a couple of years. And a handful of other states have done that too. And Washington State recently passed legislation that bans toxic chemicals in a whole bunch of like cosmetics and personal care and beauty products in the state. And those state level victories can feel a little easier to achieve. It's easier to get in touch with your state regulators. You might even see them around. And they often end up protecting all of us. They kind of stand in for federal legislation sometimes because it's really complicated and difficult for a company to make like one set of face moisturizer to sell in Washington state that complies with their state laws and then make a different version to sell in all the rest of the states. So instead, they just change the formula. They just make it safer to comply with Washington state's laws. So it's not just huge legislative changes, it's also kind of state and local changes. And then one of the other things I recommend in the book is following the organizations that are really leading this work on social media so that it's really easy to answer their calls to action so that you don't feel like you're kind of starting from scratch. So the Environmental Working Group makes that healthy living app I mentioned. They also do a lot of advocacy related to safer chemicals and safer drinking water. They're a good one to follow on social media. And they might have a post that's like, this federal bill that would protect us from harmful pesticides is up for consideration. Here are the lawmakers to call. Here's what we recommend you say. And it's really easy. They make it really easy to pitch in and then also really easy to share that so other people can pitch in. And a couple other organizations doing that kind of work are Silent Spring Institute and the Cancer Free Economy Network. And I have a big list of these organizations kind of organized by what their focus area is in the appendix of my book.
Okay, cool.
But those are a couple of the big ones that are good to just follow on social media. So it's easy to kind of pitch in when there's a call for action up.
I love it. I love it. We really do need to create a new world for our children, especially as we see these kids. I mean, kids are sick. It just the whole world just seems, at least in America, just we need to evolve and get healthier and make better decisions. And and it like we're just saying it's one step at a time. You don't have to go from A to Z. It's go to A to B, and then and just take these little steps. And honestly, Christine, that's what I did. It kind of overwhelmed me at first. I tried to do everything, it didn't work. So we take those step by step by step. And so your book is called A New War on Cancer. The Unlikely Heroes, Revolutionizing Prevention. And did this come out in May of this year?
It did, yeah, just May of this year.
Congratulations. It's so cool. You wrote a book on this. And so where would you like people to look it up? Is it on Amazon? Where's the best place to get your book?
It's available anywhere books are sold. If you buy it directly from the publisher, which is Island Press,
Okay.
you can use a discount code for 20% off. The code is WAR, WAR. And it's also available on bookshop.org.
Okay.
And when you buy books through Bookshop, they give a portion of the purchase price to your local bookstore. They ask for your zip code. You can also ask your local bookstore to order it. And it's available on Kindle and it's available as an audiobook too on Audible or anywhere else you get audiobooks.
Love audiobooks. I love them both. I like having the thing, but then there's some books that are just this one I feel like I'm going to need a hard copy. Awesome. This is so wonderful what you're doing. I know so many moms here are just going to feel so much gratitude for the work you're doing, because it can feel a little, overwhelming and just kind of uncertain. And when I get to have these conversations with people like you that are, really making changes, it gives me hope. So thank you for all that you're doing for us and our children.
Thank you so much. And thank you for helping get the message out and telling parents all this important information and making it so accessible.
No, it's my honor. It really is. Well, everyone, I'm going to make sure I'm going to get all the links of all the wonderful things that Kristina noted, but most important, her book. I'll make sure that link is there if you guys want to dive in more. Can you tell us a little bit more about what is in the book? Is it about a lot about the research and what you found? Is it like a story? What is it exactly?
Thank you for asking that. When we talk about cancer prevention, it tends to be about a lot of data and kind of long-term trends. And that stuff is really important, but it's also it's hard to connect with emotionally, right? And so while I was writing the book, I learned that only 7 to 9% of global funds for cancer go toward prevention, and all the rest go toward treatment. And there are two reasons for that. One is that there's a lot of money to be made by investing in treatments and cures. Nobody's going to get rich off of cancer prevention. And the other is that it's harder to advocate for prevention because we don't get to meet the person whose cancer we prevented, right? We don't get a hug from a mom who says, "Thank you so much for making it so that my child didn't get cancer." And when we're advocating for cancer treatment, then we can put a picture of a child battling cancer on the t-shirt and on the Facebook page. And of course, we all empathize with that and we all want to pitch in. So I, in my book, really wanted to try to put a face to cancer prevention. So there are statistics and data and facts in the book, but it's very story driven. So the book is structured around profiles of people who've devoted their life's work to keeping us safe from cancer causing chemicals in different areas of our lives. So there's a researcher who's focused on chemicals in food and drinking water. There's a researcher who's focused on children's health and specifically healthy daycares and early learning centers.
Mm.
There's a researcher who's focused on cosmetics and beauty products. There's a leader of a nonprofit that's focused on healthy building materials, and there's a grassroots activist who's focused on clean air and preventing air pollution. And I tell stories not just about their work and their advocacy and their research, but also about like their childhood and their own kids and the kind of struggles and challenges that brought them to this work and that motivate them to keep fighting.
It's so cool. It's like so many heroes' journeys, we just we move through this struggle and then we come out and then we get to like learn what we have, hold what we've learned and then we get to share it with other people. And it's a beautiful part of our evolution is in being human, I believe. So thank you for your hero's journey and bringing this book. I'm excited. I like, books with just tons of statistics and stuff. It's all great, but it can be really boring. So I'm really glad that you have some stories in there because everyone loves stories. Everyone wants to learn through stories. So awesome. All right, everyone. Well, I'm going to have all the links that Kristina had talked about, especially the one to her book in the show notes. And Kristina, I would love to have you on again in the future. Will you come back and chat with us again?
Yeah, I'd love to come back. Thank you so much for having me. This has been such a great conversation.
It really has. Thanks for being with us. All right, everyone. We'll catch you on the next Tippy Moms podcast.